Welcome back to another edition. Recently, I was talking with a client about the difficulty there is in having options available when going into an independent or assisted living facility. And the problems with that are often when someone decides that they need to go into such a facility, that the waiting lists are months to up to 5 years to get into, especially the unit that you may want. We have an assisted living facility in our town that has all 3 levels of care, which would be independent senior living, assisted living, and what we used to call nursing home care, which is now skilled care or health care. And just depending on exactly what you need, if you want one of the larger independent living townhomes or apartments, like I said, the waiting list for those can be up to 5 years. Even more recently, they had a 2-bedroom assisted living unit come up that had not come up for 5 years. So options are a good thing. I'm just a guy that really wants a lot of options. I have parts of me that get pretty frustrated when there are no options, and it doesn't matter if it's for reservations at an event or traveling reservations, dining reservations. I like to have options, and I often make reservations when there is no immediate penalty for cancellation. Almost even on a whim that, well, we don't know that we're going, but let's make all the reservations. And if we don't go, we can cancel them before there are any financial penalties. So this would be much the same. It would be good to make reservations at a long-term health care facility long before you need it, so that when you get there, you've got options. In so many cases, from what I have seen with clients and others, is that when that immediate decision comes, yes, we need to get into a long-term care facility at this moment, the options are very, very lean. And most people have to grab the first unit that comes up. And so that means usually not getting the unit you want, the location you want, at the price you want. So why? What is behind delaying on this need? And I think one is, well, it's not today. It's not happening today. There's not a problem today. Well, that's probably true. I got on the waiting list for a long-term care health facility in our town probably 5 years ago. I'm nowhere close today in needing such of a facility. But that could change tomorrow. Hopefully, I'm good for 10 to 15, even 20 years. But we don't know. And needing long-term care is largely something that is not an unknown. How can we say that? Well, it's kind of like in budgeting, we've talked about setting aside future need expenses. and this is expenses needed for car repair, home repair, deductibles on healthcare policies, where sometimes we look at those as emergencies, and we don't really provide for that. Well, they're not emergencies in the true sense of the word. We know these things are going to happen. We know our cars are going to break down. We know our houses are going to need repair. We even know that we're going to need to fund healthcare expenses, especially, today large deductibles are the norm. We know high probability with the healthcare that they're going to happen. We just don't know when. And so this is the same thing with long-term care. According to the Administration for Community Living, about 70% of people who are 65 today will need some type of long-term care in their remaining years. Now, of that 70%, 20% will need long-term care in a nursing home, and the remaining 50% will need long-term care in an assisted living facility or in their own home with the help of a caregiver. Now, with this, we haven't even talked about going into senior living, independent senior living. This 70% is in some type of assisted living. Well, those are odds I don't want to bet against. 70% are pretty fair odds. So what is more unknown is the timing of the need. Now, the most people, from my experience, and I did find some data online that would support this, most people wait until there's a crisis before making a move into a long-term care facility. And usually the crisis is very quick, like a stroke, a fall, or a heart attack. Something that you go from being completely independent to very needy of help and around-the-clock services. Now, in some cases like that, a rehab center can bring a person back to normal. But I'm talking in the case where coming back to normal is not going to be anything that is quick and may be very permanent. Even health declines that are gradual, when ignored or not dealt with proactively, can become a crisis. And of course, this is the emotional issue to really look at. So we're talking about cognitive declines like Alzheimer's disease, dementia, sight loss, hearing loss, mobility issues, even social isolation. These are usually not events that just happen, like a stroke, a fall, or a heart attack. They are issues that come on gradually and can be dealt with proactively. But it's not common for us to deal with these issues proactively. Most people wait until it becomes a crisis. And I want to delve into the why on doing that. And in case that you think we're going to get into something that's a quick fix on how to go from being really somebody that lives in denial or being dismissive of the conditions that they have, minimize the conditions that they are having, to kind of instantly go to being proactive. There's no switch. There's no switch there to flip. Our brain just they don't usually reprogram themselves very quickly without a pretty good dive into the emotional side that says, why? Why am I not really treating this with seriousness? And of course, for those of you that are students and aware of Changing for Good by Prochaska, we're talking about there's 6 stages of change that they list: pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and then phase they call termination, which means you've integrated this as this is now your new way of behaving. It's hard for somebody to go from pre-contemplation to contemplation easily, right? Because pre-contemplation in and of itself is denial that there's any problem. What are you talking about? There's no problem here. So some of the reasons of being in pre-contemplation, of reasons why we're not taking that action are some cognitive biases that contribute to not being proactive. The first one that I thought of was loss aversion. So this is a state of mind that leads us to prioritize avoiding losses over seeking equivalent or even greater gains. All right. So how does this fit in? Well, in contemplating a move to a long-term care facility, the fear of losing one's current lifestyle and autonomy can lead to delaying a decision or minimizing that there's even a problem until a crisis forces it. So it's that loss aversion. I want to avoid at all costs the loss of my living in my current home, my current lifestyle. Another one that plays into this is procrastination bias. This bias, probably most of you are familiar with, results in delaying actions that are uncomfortable or difficult. Well, there's the emotional connection, right? Delays in transitioning to a long-term care facility can be attributed to all of the difficult emotions that are tied to selling a home, selling or parting with belongings, the disruption of my daily routine. This can really trigger a lot of vulnerability, a lot of exiles in IFS speak that, can, for whatever reasons, can have some wounding around this and just have super fear of what that means to let go of those things. Even with the factual knowledge that letting go of those things are going to make room for something new, but something that can even be better. Okay, so that goes back to the loss aversion, a potential gain. It's hard to internalize what taking action may mean on the positive side emotionally. And it's so common that I have seen with clients when they make that decision or the decision is forced to go into some type of long-term care facility or into independent living, that they say, why didn't I do this years ago? They actually life gets better and they begin thriving. I don't know what the research would be on this, but I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. I want to give it a 10 out of 10 because I don't know anybody that was sad about it. But we'll give it a 9 out of 10 that say, wow, life is actually better. I didn't realize how difficult things really were. And the last one is optimism bias. And this is a bias that causes us to overestimate our chances of success and underestimate the potential for failure. So translating that to our long-term care issue that we're exploring, it could lead us to believe that our health will improve, or the need of care isn't as pressing as it appears, or, oh, you know, we'll find a way to deal with it when we get there. Things are going to work out just fine. And I mean, my wife accuses me of being a pessimist all the time. And there may be a slight bit of truth to that, but I look at myself as being a realist. And sometimes optimism can just cloud our vision and actually serve as a cloud or a fog to really dealing with the fear or the terror or the sadness or the grief that lies underneath, really taking a realistic look. So, you know, as with all biases, we have 3 here, right? We have loss aversion, procrastination, and optimism. And overcoming them really requires to do some deep emotional work. It really requires us to go within and to interview those parts of ourselves that are so fearful as to why, what's the story, what's the fear, what's the fear if that happens, what's the fear if that happens, kind of drilling down to really get to the core. And in most cases, this would be a core money script or a core belief that may not be serving us well. A lot of these beliefs are left over from younger times in our lives that just got shoved aside and have been exiled since then. Facts usually don't work. Like I wrote a column on this several months ago, and sending somebody my column on this rarely moves the needle to motivate them to go into action. We've talked, I mean, that's the point of this podcast, is most financial decisions are made emotionally, not logically. And logically, it's very easy to read something on this, listen to this podcast, and to go, yeah, that makes sense. I never had that information. I'm going to go into action. We know that happens typically in about 20% of the cases. In 80% of the cases, it really takes some deep emotional work to change behavior. And most people are unwilling to do that. So the rest of this is for the person that says, well, I am open to being proactive, which I think is probably 99% of you listening to this podcast. So in this particular case, we really need to start early. And there's a number of things that we can do. And what is starting early? At what age is early? Well, I don't know. I bought long-term care insurance in my early 50s. Now, that admittedly was a little too soon. But part of that is I wanted to go through that experience because I was recommending it to clients, and I really try to experience most things that make any sense for me to experience that I might recommend to a client. So I did that. I don't know if I've ever said this, but my major takeaway is don't do the memory part of the long-term care insurance exam when you're driving and on the cell phone. Sometimes I'm a little slow learner. So here are some things to do, or here's some things that maybe you can nudge somebody that could be a client of yours. It could be a friend or a family member of yours, but this would be mostly for you. And the first thing to do is get some financial planning advice. Long-term care is costly. About all of my solutions to long-term care assume that a person has some funds, that they can afford things. And the more that you've saved for this, the more options are open to you. So it really necessitates a saving plan and really proactively putting money aside to provide for your long-term care. It's not just insurance. Now that, secondly, is an option, long-term care insurance, but it has eligibility parameters. You need to be in really pretty good health when you get it. It can be really expensive. I know that long-term care policy I bought that was like, $1,200. I think it has quadrupled. I think it's around $4,800 now. So if a couple's going out and going to buy long-term care insurance today, paying $10,000 a year would not be unheard of. Well, does that make sense? You need some financial analysis to determine if it does. If you are not worth much at all, you probably can rely on Title 19. If you're worth, I don't know, say over $3 million, you probably don't need it either because you probably can self-fund. Another thing is to assess regularly your abilities and then revisit that assessment every few years. We use something called the Journey into Elderhood. It's like we pay for a package of things like this in our financial planning firm, and it may cost a couple $1,000 a year, which is reasonable for us, but not reasonable for an individual to get this, to pay that, to get access to it. Many financial planners have these evaluations, and we give these every 3 years to clients just to track on a 1 to 10 different areas. How are you doing? I got online to try and come up with a source, and I found one from Brightview Senior Living. It's an online assessment. It's a little promotional, but I thought it was reasonably good, at least to get a person thinking about things. But you might want to take a look at that assessment. Let me see if I can find it. It's Brightviews, plural, seniorliving.com, and look for their assessment. And then, of course, you need to take a look. Which senior living centers would I like to live in? Are they in my area? Are they outside of my area? You may not know exactly what you need today, but sometimes, like the one I talked about in the opening, some of them have all levels of care. And then I would suggest to you to enroll on the wait lists for your most wanted long-term care facilities, which would enhance the likelihood of getting your preferred choice when the crisis hits. and I discussed the one in my town. There's other places you can get on their waiting list, and when you come to the top, they'll keep you at the top of the waiting list. And some of these are for no charge. In others of them, you'll go back to the bottom. Well, what do you have to lose if you're on that waiting list? It can't hurt your chances, let's put it that way. But it can certainly help. And I did mention the facility in my hometown. They charge $6,000 to get on the waiting list. But that's all refundable. You can call them up any day and get your $6,000 back. So all you're losing is the potential return on that $6,000, which today I figure a reasonable long-term return on something that's invested with some balance, like a 60-40 portfolio, is about 5% or $300 a year. Well, $300 a year is not a lot of money to secure the option of having the unit you want to go into when you need to go into it. So, the bottom line to all this is that the necessity for long-term care isn't a mystery. 70% of us are going to need assisted living or skilled nursing. It's the timing that remains uncertain. So if we can do work on our biases, really do that emotional work, and then adopt a proactive strategy for making that available if a crisis does hit. I'm not talking about being proactive. That can just really make things so much easier when that need arises. And it takes a lot of emotional work for most of us to bring ourselves into a position of even acknowledging that high probability this is going to happen. It's going to come with challenges emotionally, but I am ready to go into action. So thanks so much for being with me another week, and I look forward to talking with you again next week.